Posture's terrible. Nice.
Hello everyone and welcome back to our monthly journalist roundtable. Today we are going to discuss, and we already have been discussing, the impact of Brexit. My German colleague Christophe Debets was just about to explain to us what the UK can gain by Brexit. So, Christophe, tell us.
The advantage is, of course, in the long term. In the long term, Britain will have to compete. Britain will now have to compete with extremely competitive nations in Asia. They will not be protected by the protective tariffs of the European Union, but that is an advantage. Just look at Switzerland and Norway. They are both not members of the EU. They do have their own kind of trade agreements with other countries. Switzerland with more countries than anyone else. And the fact that they are small, that they cannot get protection for certain industries, makes them competitive because they have to be, and that creates wealth. If you look at the wealth gap between Germany and Switzerland, it was widening all the time, especially since the introduction of the euro. The Swiss have the gap between prosperity in Germany and Switzerland has dramatically widened.
In favor of Switzerland.
In favor of Switzerland, yes.
So you mean economically Great Britain can gain from the Brexit,
yes.
But long term. So when you say long term, it's like 10 years, 20 years.
10 years, 5, 10 years. It will depend. Well, you see, all depends on the rules and the conditions of the Brexit.
Yeah, and also how long it will take to do the Brexit.
To effectively,
the deal could take 10 years, according to some experts.
Yes,
well, no, but you see, this is. I'm always asking for common sense and for goodwill. And with goodwill and common sense, this shouldn't be a problem.
But you're not guaranteed either of those things, Christophe.
No. Yes, of course. And the culprit, in my view, is not in Britain.
Yes, but, I mean, look...
so it's going to be a messy divorce, according to you?
I don't know if it's going to be messy. I hope not. I live in UK. I work in UK. Well, not just in UK, but, you know, my life is there. It's based there. And obviously I want the best for the United Kingdom. But, you know, at the moment, I think it's you know, there's a little bit of mutual resentment. There's resentment because from the part of the EU, I don't think they fully understand the reasons behind Brexit. You know, if Britain was always keen to pick and choose their bits and, you know, what interests them and what doesn't, you know, and they've somehow built this very particular place inside, you know, the European Union, and suddenly, you know, in a matter of months, you know, they say no, we want to leave. For me, it's there's not a lot. I don't see, you know, what scares me is that so far I haven't seen a plan, a credible alternative. You know, Brexiteers will argue, oh, we will be able to trade with the rest of the world. But is it all that it's about? Is it just trade that matters?
Of course not. It's about independence, sovereignty and democracy more than anything else.
Oh, is that a new motto? Like, like the liberté, égalité, fraternité. So now
a bit like that. But for the true
Brexiteers,
that is the starting point for everything.
Which is why it makes it very difficult for Theresa May to then dispute Scottish nationalism, because...
But they had a referendum in 2014 and they voted to stay with the United Kingdom.
Yeah, but
many wanted to stay with the EU.
The circumstances have changed.
But if they vote to leave the UK, they're leaving the EU. So if they want to stay in the EU, the way to do that is not to have a referendum to they're out of the EU, whichever case happens.
No, if they, I mean...
But if they leave the UK, I mean, you're right, they wouldn't automatically be members of the EU. And there was talk that they would have to join the back of the queue, so to speak. So that is true.
Not too sure. I heard Juncker say that they could be fast-tracked.
Yes, but this is...
But all of this is just speculation.
This is speculation, and this is a terrible situation for the European Union, because you have other countries, particularly Spain, which have a similar case with Catalonia.
Yes.
So, what if Scotland, an independent Scotland, would go to the European Court of Justice and argue, well, we are the legal successor to the United Kingdom as member of the EU. Well, then they would continue to be a member of the EU. But this is a legal can of worms.
Yes. I agree.
But as far as
so basically the lawyers are the ones who are going to make money in the next 2 or 10 years.
Well, you've heard something that I haven't heard, because what I understood was that the EU have made it plain. Remember, just after the June 23rd referendum, virtually the next day, Nicola Sturgeon went to see the Europeans, and they sent her away with a flea in her ear, telling her that she wasn't going to have automatic acceptance into the European
Union. But the situation has changed.
At the time,
but I don't think that's changed.
There were a few ideas that were floated, and one of these ideas, and I believe, I cannot guarantee, but I believe it, came from Juncker, of this kind of fast-tracking process. But I mean, this is just speculation. Picking up on what we were discussing, for example, I don't understand. What I don't understand is the lack of the outline even of a plan, of an alternative. And this is what I find worrying.
But what sort of plan are you talking about? What kind of plan?
What sort of how this exit is going to
the plan
needs to be negotiated.
The plan is there to take your fate into your own hands and decide, and not being run like a colony from the masters in Brussels.
That is one way to see it.
A lot of people feel that way.
Another way to see it was that the UK was part of the European family? No?
I just don't see it that way. I just don't see it that way.
What's your vision?
My vision is, people need a degree of certainty. And at the moment, all we have is just fog and very vague ideas.
But you will be able to decide about the fog and who will create that fog in the future.
You're responsible for your own fog.
My point is that the whole debate around Brexit, I mean, if you look at it, from the moment David Cameron announced the referendum, it was an electoral pledge. And, okay, he organised it, but can anyone tell me whether the result was actually binding or consultative?
No, it was consultative.
It was consultative.
Yeah. Non-binding.
Okay.
Yeah.
Non-binding. Okay. So then, sure. Okay. Then the whole sort of soap opera immediately after David Cameron resigning. The jostling for positions. I mean, the whole thing was a little bit. It was very strange.
But does the result not mean anything? The fact that the majority of people voted to leave the European Union, should that not be the main thing?
Obviously, and that would set the direction.
But that should definitely matter. But then the same question can be asked of Scotland, who voted really overwhelmingly to remain.
But they also voted overwhelmingly to stay in the United Kingdom 2 years ago.
There's been a material change of circumstance.
Yes. But we were told that was a once-in-a-lifetime vote or a once-in-a-generation vote.
We didn't expect
2 years have passed.
We didn't expect Brexit to happen between.
And I mean, from what I understand, many Scots voted to remain with the UK because they also wanted to remain with the EU. Yeah. So the circumstances have changed a lot.
Yes.
But I had a question to you about
the
Scottish situation now. I mean, first of all, we don't. So they have asked for a second independence referendum, and now
the Scottish Parliament has voted and has voted for calling a second referendum. Yes. They're now in discussion with Westminster, who has said that it's not the time.
Said no, not now.
Disagree with the time scale. I don't think that Westminster can actually stop Scotland from having a second independence referendum.
But it wouldn't be binding. They could have a.
It would be consultative, but not binding.
But it wouldn't be consultative in the same way as the Brexit referendum, because it would be organised just in
consultative or binding or.
Well, there's the central government in Westminster.
Everything is possible.
I think we're coming on to another point that I would like to sort of talk about, which is process. I mean, Parliament has been sidelined. British Parliament has been sidelined. The House of Lords they've been sidelined. Henry VIII clauses.
Wow! Oh, come on. The Henry VIII.
Henry VIII
clause. History lesson.
That is
like
that
little rabbit out of the hat.
I think you'd have to explain to viewers what that Henry VIII clause is, because they're not going to necessarily know.
It's the
so we have to go down memory line.
It's a way of circumventing the sovereignty of Parliament, of like, casting the Parliament aside, and Prime Minister Theresa May gets her will, whatever she wants, gets it done. I have no issue with Prime Minister Theresa May. I think she's the best person, given the offer at the moment. She's definitely, for me, the best person to lead this.
So what is your concern that it's not going into the negotiations? You think they have no plan?
No. I think there must be a plan somewhere. I'm pretty sure.
In the drawer.
Not many people know about it, but then I see Parliament being sidelined. A woman, Gina Miller, had to start a legal process for Parliament to be given a say. For me, this is unparalleled.
So, but I mean, the whole thing is unprecedented. That's why. That's why Christophe was speaking of fog, and the others were speaking of grey areas. I just wanted to come back for a few seconds on the Scottish question. So, how is this going to the whole Scotland independence? How is this going to affect the negotiations with Brussels?
Well, I think Nicola Sturgeon has very deliberately tried to position the an eventual second Scottish referendum on independence right at the worst time for Theresa May and for the British government, because it suits her objectives. So I think if it goes ahead in the time frame that they had requested, that it would be
between 2018 and 2019,
late 2018, I think, which would be a particularly crucial moment for the Brexit negotiations. I think that would lead to. I don't think that the British government would have the time or the means to really battle a second Scottish independence referendum effectively if that timescale was allowed.
It's worth pointing out, though, that according to the opinion polls, which we all take with a pinch of salt now, half the people in Scotland want to remain with the United Kingdom. It's not as if there's an overwhelming wave of pro-independence.
So it would be, again, really close.
Yeah.
And a second IndyRef would be, again, really close.
For me, it's the SNP's agenda. It's not the Scottish People's agenda. It's the Scottish Nationalists, Nicola Sturgeon's party agenda.
There might be some truth in that, but at the end of the day, the vote will be given to the people, so it's maybe irrelevant if it's if they do have the final say.
But I think it's cynical.
I wouldn't be so sure that the Nationalists would win a second IndyRef. And I can understand Theresa May's position that this is not the time to do it, because you complained about what we haven't been told what would happen afterwards. If you make now a second independence referendum, it's exactly the same situation. So it's far better if you have the Brexit deal, and after the Brexit deal, you can decide whether you want to do it.
I can obviously understand that would be the British Prime Minister's position. I mean, that makes sense to me. Whether that tallies with Nicola Sturgeon's objectives, that's a different question.
But I think it is very important that, given how the Conservative Party are not particularly popular in Scotland, I think that Theresa May has to play her cards very, very carefully, because if it seems like she's antagonising Nicola Sturgeon or the Scottish National Party, that really could backfire on her.
But has she anything to offer?
To offer the Scottish people? Yes. Well, she's talked about how none of the current devolved powers, so the powers that go to the regional governments, would be taken away.
And they might even be increased, she said.
And they've promised today or yesterday that some powers would be given to Edinburgh when they come back to Westminster.
When they come back from Brussels to Westminster, then there would be
fisheries is a big one for Scotland.
For Northern Scotland.
So they stand to gain more devolved powers without, even if they had no second IndyRef.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of powers, some of our viewers are also interested in the money, and it has been made clear that after Brexit, London is not going to pay anything to Brussels anymore. But what about subsidies? I mean, what about the money Brussels? What about the money the fishermen and the farmers got in the UK and the research projects, etc. That is also a big grey area and an area of concern. No?
Fishermen are delighted that we're leaving the European Union. I heard an interview with a fisherman from Peterhead in the north of Scotland. He was thrilled. He said he'd been in the industry for 40 years. He'd seen it decimated by the European Union because fishermen from other European countries had been allowed to come and fish in their waters. And at last now he could see a way of taking back the industry.
Yes, exactly. That is one of the points. And the money, look, Britain is a net contributor to the EU. They pay in all these regional subsidy funds more money than they get back. So they are better off. They can take that money that is now paid by Brussels, paid themselves to the fishermen, to the farmers,
to everyone. But then it is a very important question of redistribution, if that is really going to happen.
That sounds like a Nigel Farage thing. It sounds a little bit like, I remember, was it
350 million to the NHS?
Every week? 350 million every week?
It was 100 million out of the 350 million that was paid to the EU.
Oh, okay.
Look, the figure is, it's simple.
But wait, if I remember correctly, Mr. Farage, the day after the referendum, while he was celebrating with, a pint of, lager, and suddenly he was questioned, so is the money really going to go to the NHS? He was like, no.
Well, it's not his decision, he's not in government.
Of course, yes.
But he promised that during the campaign.
It was one of the main arguments.
It was all over the press.
Yes, and the argument is right, and it's correct. Britain pays in 11 billion per year more than it gets out. So you can get all the subsidies, all the goodies from the EU you paid now yourself, and then you have another 11 billion pounds to spend.
And I think that's oversimplifying it. I don't think it's a simple balance sheet where there's money going into the EU and money coming out from the EU, and you take away one figure from the other. I think there's a lot more at play in terms of economics than just we pay this much to the EU, they pay us this much back, because there's also what it brings in terms of investment, foreign investment, in terms of free trade, in terms of many more factors.
We are talking about taxpayers' money. This money is
money that I pay.
Yes, money that we all pay. Money that we all pay.
Oh yeah, no, I'm very concerned, but I still, again, that's another area where, before the referendum, with the press, shrieking and trying to...
Right.
They were right?
Yes, of course.
Well, I mean, they were right. No, I don't think they were right, because there was so much noise that every time someone with a little bit of sense sort of flagged up something that would go against the Leavers' wishes, they would drown out.
Sure, I mean, you can't spend the money only once, so they promised it twice or three times. Different people promising different things, but the money is effectively
kept.
Money is effectively there, and Britain will be better off money-wise.
I hope so, but
speaking of the campaign, David Talbot is concerned by the tabloids and by their coverage of the campaign, and also now of the whole Brexit negotiations. Have they had a particular influence on the whole thing?
You can't deny it.
So the British press is like
overwhelmingly pro-Brexit, and it led up to the referendum, and it's continued since. And Theresa May's government will be under scrutiny from these same papers. So if she gives the slightest compromise to the EU, she's going to come in for trouble. So that they're going to be monitoring what she does. Just an example is from what João said now. Following the campaign, the Supreme Court ruled that Parliament had to have a say when this famous Article 50 was triggered. Yeah. And when that happened, one of the tabloids, one of the papers in question, the Daily Mail, printed the pictures of 3 of the Supreme Court judges who'd made this decision on the front page with the headline, "Enemies of the People." So that gives some idea of what I was saying. It's absolutely strident, it's overwhelming.
It's worse than just that. There's also misinformation, blatant misinformation.
Is that like the Queen backs Brexit?
The Queen backs Brexit. There's so many examples, but it started years before the actual Brexit referendum.
Exactly.
For example, the European Union had to set up a website called Euromyths to debunk some of the claims that were coming from these tabloids, particularly the Sun, Rupert Murdoch, News Corp, and the Daily Mail. Things like, for example, the famous bent banana legislation.
What was that one?
Where there was an article which suggested that the EU controlled how much of a curve there was in British bananas.
Yes, but all of that was started by Boris Johnson when he was the Telegraph correspondent in Brussels.
Yes, that's true. And there was another one, was the prawn cocktail crisps, is a favourite of a lot of British people, prawn cocktail flavour crisps, And there was also an article just before Brexit that said that they were going to ban these crisps because there was an additive or something in the crisps that the EU was going to ban.
That might
Again,
have
it was
swung the
debunked.
vote.
It wasn't true. So in this climate of misinformation and, you know, a public who could be better informed before they make a decision like this.
Misinformation, I'd rather call lies.
It is lies.
Lies.
There were lies.
Lies. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't, you know, I would read the press like I do every day, and some of it I just could not believe. It was like, it's the stuff of comedy. You know, and
but on the other side, there's accusations of bias as well. For example, just recently, more than 70 members of Parliament have written to the BBC complaining that its coverage is too anti-Brexit, that it's not portraying a positive enough vision of Brexit. It's giving too much airtime to Remainers or Ramonas, as critics would call them.
is a
could they back it up?
Yeah, so
could they back it up? Maybe because BBC is now based in, a big part of it is based in Manchester.
But I don't know where these MPs come from, but most of them are Conservatives.
Yeah.
But Lesley,
surprisingly,
you made a point a few moments ago that I thought was very interesting. You said that Theresa May is under scrutiny from the tabloids. So you said that she would go more along the wishes of the Brexiteers. But then what about, I mean, it was a close vote. The referendum was close. Yes, Brexit won, and yes, it's a democratic decision, but it was 48% voted to remain. So do you think that they feel represented by the choices Theresa May has made?
No, not at all, and that's why we had this massive demonstration last week. People are distraught, they're disappointed, they're scared. I mean, it must be terrible to be a fervent Remainer or Ramona and to be in this situation, because all of us are in this fog. But for the people who desperately wanted to stay with the EU, then it's even more scary. One thing that might give them hope.
So she hasn't really done anything to reunite the people.
Because nobody knows what's happening. But Guy Verhofstadt, who's doing the negotiations for the European Parliament, he has said that he's very keen on doing whatever he can to preserve certain rights for Brits who want to preserve their link with the European Union. I've no idea exactly what he has in mind, but, you know...
For Brits living in...
He hasn't made that clear yet. Again, like everything else, it's shrouded in mystery, but the European Union are aware.
Another question, I mean, basically we got a few questions, but the majority is about, I am a European, I'm living in Great Britain with my family, what will happen to me? Or I am a Brit and I'm living in France, what is going to happen to me? So this, I think many people are scared of becoming pawns in these negotiations. And I mean, even some of us around this table are concerned. I mean, you live in France and...
Yeah, and I feel very vulnerable because although I've been here for nearly 20 years, I don't have French citizenship. So I feel vulnerable. But at the same time, I very much agree with Theresa May's strategy, because she was under tremendous pressure in the UK to unilaterally protect the rights of EU immigrants in Britain without asking for anything in return for Brits living in the EU. And she said, no, I want it to be reciprocal. And I think that's perfect. But she's come under so much pressure for not doing that. She's being seen as, you know, using people as bargaining chips.
It's like logical, no? I mean...
I think so.
Yeah, but that's not the mood in Britain. In Britain, a lot of people have said she's using these EU citizens as bargaining chips, and she's come under tremendous pressure, and I keep thinking, no, hold out, because I'm obviously concerned about my situation.
I mean, couldn't we just, you spoke of goodwill earlier, so couldn't they just take this question out and say, well, the Europeans in Great Britain, they just get to stay, and the European...
It's priority, it's going to be dealt with at the beginning from both sides.
It's a priority, and I obviously, you know, again, I think Theresa May is the best person to conduct, you know, and lead this process, but, you know, it's at the moment it's just that everything is just very foggy. Very foggy.
We'll have to meet again in 2 years' time and have the same discussion.
Yes, theoretically it's over in 2 years' time, but...
theoretically.
No, it's not theoretically. It is over in 2 years'
No, it can be extended if all of the 27 countries agree to it.
Good luck with that one.
So you think the UK is definitely going to leave in 2 years?
Then it will be over, unless they have a comprehensive agreement that will create some kind of Brexit at the end of 2019 or a bit longer, but I doubt that. And if there is no agreement, no deal is worse than no deal is better than a bad deal.
That's what Theresa May says.
She's absolutely right with this one. So
we are reaching the end of this discussion, so maybe I'll give each and every one of you a chance to say not your last words, but your last words on that subject. James, you want to start?
It won't be my last words.
Yes.
I think that, well, to finish, I think I'd like to say that when the Brexit referendum was called, the people who called the Conservative Party did not have Northern Ireland's interests in mind. And that the effect that it'll have on the people of Northern Ireland, again, it's unknown, but it's also extremely precarious and extremely dangerous. And I think it was maybe an irresponsible move. I also think there's a difference between referenda. This particular referendum, I feel the public were ill-informed, misinformed and lied to. And I think that has an effect on the outcome. Compared to a Scottish referendum, whether you agree or disagree with their independence vote, I think everybody agrees that the public were well-informed and mobilised.
Yes,
that's an important difference.
Yes. Well-informed, yeah. No, just well-informed. They didn't know what currency they would have, for example, afterwards. So there was still a lot of fog.
Yes, but there was debate. There was, I think, good quality debate. From both
Lesley,
sides.
with what do you want to finish?
Well, just on a personal note, you know, I'm really divided in all of this because I stand to lose out as a Brit living in France. So obviously I'm concerned about my own personal situation, but I can't help still being a little bit excited about, you know, the fact that we are taking back control, as someone once said. That's the slogan. But just to me, it seems more democratic that you make your laws, you control your borders in your own country, rather than having unelected officials in Brussels doing that. So I have mixed feelings.
Christophe?
I can only warn the European Union to do a hard course against Britain in the Brexit negotiations, because I thoroughly believe that Britain has the better cards in this play. They can always walk away from the table and say no deal, okay. They will have to stand in the future alone, they will have to compete, so it doesn't matter. But the European Union has to lose many, many things. Britain is the largest market for German car producers. So the losers will be specific industries in Europe that will hurt the particular countries. For instance, they sell more champagne in the UK than in the US and in Germany together. So
you're saying the UK has more to gain and the EU has to lose from a hard Brexit?
The EU has lots of things to lose in particular areas, and that will hurt particularly industries very, very hard.
Joe, few brief words?
Yes, I'm lost for words because, well, I'm worried about, you know, the legal and the democratic process in Britain, which I feel was seriously compromised during the referendum, well, the post-referendum period. I'm worried about that.
Okay, so we have some people are excited, some people are worried, and I'm sure that we are going to talk again about Brexit and about the negotiations in the coming 2 years and maybe even more. So this concludes our debate of today. The next Journalist Roundtable will be about the French elections on the 21st of April. Join us then. Have a good evening.